Good morning, and this is Out and Back, and I'm Paul Kirwin, and I have a great guest today. It's Matt Vance, and Matt has been in the product review and customer review business for a very long time, and he's written a book, and it's called The Review Cycle, and it's really an interesting book, and he goes into a lot of detail about reviews, how to engage with consumers, the importance of reviews, and I want to welcome you, Matt, to Out and Back.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Super good to be here. Good to see you again. And yeah, I'm excited to chat. This will be good.
Great. Let's start here. How did you get interested in product reviews? What was the catalyst for all of this?
So I guess you could call it fate or just maybe a last chance. I guess if you go all the way back to my senior year in college, I thought that I would have so many job offers. I was a student athlete. I ran track at Utah State. I did multiple internships. I had good grades. I tried really hard. And I interviewed at 54 companies with no job offers. It was intense. And then I finally got an offer almost a full year later. I had already graduated, and it was at a small startup called Maloof. They're a bedding manufacturer. They make pillows and bed sheets and everything in that space. There were about 35 employees at the time, and I was the second hire in the e-commerce department, which was just really small. They were operating only on Amazon.com at the time, and they said your job is to figure out reviews. And so with those cards dealt to me, I just said, well, I guess this is like my last chance, or this is what I'm supposed to do. So I'm going to do it with all my might. So I figured out what to do. That I only had two things told to me. They said respond to reviews and get more reviews. That was my job description. And so I started doing that. At the time, you could respond to reviews on Amazon. So I started writing review responses and figuring out how to give away products in exchange for reviews. Also, at the time, this was in 2014, so it was allowable with Amazon guidelines to give away products for incentivized reviews. They banned that practice on October 3rd, 2016, which that date will forever be burned in my memory because of how impactful it was to this story, to my career. But that's where I got my start. And things grew at Maloof over the next few years. I ended up building a team of 7 people just managing reviews. We were managing 1,500 listings across dozens of different e-commerce platforms for multiple different brands. And I was figuring out how to teach other people what I was doing. Like I figured out some tricks of like better ways to respond to reviews, easier ways to get reviews. And so now not only was I responsible for doing it, but like teaching other people and starting to scale it. And that was the very beginning of the book, was some how-to articles that I'd written to train my own team.
So that brings us to a really good question, I think, which is Maloof, and then I think you went to iFit.
Yep.
And both of those companies understood the importance of reviews. And you and I both know that the most powerful influencer in the marketplace today is the consumer to consumer conversation. And much of that takes place on research with regard to consumers who are shopping and then writing and then reading reviews that the buyers have written.
Yep.
Why do so many marketing departments, and I think you experienced this yourself within the two companies, why do they, it's not that they discount it, however, they don't give it as much weight as they need to?
Yeah, it's tricky. I think there's a lot of fun things to do in marketing, creative things. but you're totally right that consumers influencing consumers is hugely impactful. From some of the research that I cite in the book, consumers trust online reviews, or 85% of consumers trust online reviews as much as a personal recommendation. But individual business professionals are not trusted as much. There was a study that HubSpot did, and they found that the most trusted business professional was doctors. 49% of consumers trust doctors. And then all the way down the list at the bottom, you had salespeople and marketers only trusted at 3%, which is pretty crazy. So instead of like trying to influence the consumer with what you have to say, which the consumer naturally believes is biased, because you have something to gain, it's like, to your point, it's so much more efficient to shift that focus to, hey, this is what everyone else is saying. Instead of saying, I think this fridge is great, I'm trying to sell you a fridge. Actually, let's pull up the reviews. Look, this is what so-and-so is saying. It's ranked this. It has a 4.5 star, and it's our #1 bestseller. So this is why I would recommend this fridge. And all of a sudden, that's less aggressive. It feels more, genuine. And there's a chapter dedicated to marketing with reviews, and where I outline some of the recommendations I've given to marketing departments about how to identify a really good review to quote in an ad, and what types of review stats are acceptable to quote in static ads like print or billboards or other places. Because you don't want to put something on a package or a billboard like 4.8 stars that could change, and then your package is out of date and you look kind of foolish. So you can say something like, we have 1,000 plus 5-star reviews, read them here, because that's not going to be inaccurate in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it would seem that the language of the consumer talking with other consumers, especially the language of consumers who are happy purchasers, could be utilized in the messaging in marketing. Do you address that in the book?
Yeah, so one thing that I talk about is how to identify the experience drivers that most consumers are enjoying. So essentially, you want to analyze all your reviews, and you want to tally up the top positive and negative mentions. Now, those top positive mentions, those are your top experience drivers that you want to talk about. If it's, say that, talking about that fridge again, everyone's loving the type of ice that it makes. Oh, look, these ice cubes are really small. I can fit them in, a small lid water bottle. It's awesome. Okay, that's a feature that people are already enjoying and talking about. So you should be talking about it, because if people are searching for that thing and you're talking about it in your advertising, then you're finding a consumer that's already more likely to enjoy that fridge for the right reasons.
Yeah, and do you also address in the book keywords that consumers use in their reviews when either talking about a brand or the product of that brand?
Yeah, I think that would probably relate to the harvesting insights and reading all those reviews and seeing the top things that are coming up. I recently was working on a case study where we were evaluating that same thing. There was one specific word that was coming up very frequent for a specific product, and we went in to see what phrases were associated with that word, and it helped us identify a key issue that needed to be addressed. So yeah, it's critically important to do that analysis and understand what people are saying, what they like and don't like about your product. But it's not just the product too. It could be experiences connected to it as well, like return rates or delivery time or other things that you need to consider as part of the holistic experience.
What was that word?
In this case, it was the word recipe. It was for a food product, and the recipe had changed. And so people's expectations of what this particular food item would taste like and the texture and all those things, it wasn't the same. They weren't managing expectations around that recipe change, and so people were disappointed.
Interesting. I similar situations with regard to um, channel signal, in that there are certain footwear companies who truly believe that the the great they sell fit and style all the time. And consumers many of those consumers in one particular brand I'm talking about, they talk about comfort
Hmm.
and how comfortable the shoes are. And that's really the comforts keyword is what really drives the star average, which we find to be interesting. Obviously, in our analysis, we get that right back to our customers. With regard to iFit, I don't want you to give any trade secrets away, but what were you finding in the reviews with regard to when you ran product reviews in e-commerce for iFit? What did you find that you could deliver to senior management that they didn't know?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, how I was talking earlier about there are other attributes to an experience that aren't necessarily the product itself. That was definitely something that came up in the iFit scenario. iFit is offering a more complex experience where they're selling a piece of hardware like a treadmill or a stationary bike, but then there's also the content that's displayed on the screen, and then there's also the variety of how the software and the hardware are interacting to provide almost like a virtual reality experience. It's not like true virtual reality with a headset, but where the treadmill is going up and down, following the terrain of a workout that they're doing at that time, watching the trainer run in Africa or wherever they are. So there were a lot of components that extended beyond the transaction of purchasing just the treadmill that were mentioned. And so highlighting those things, really it gave action items to different departments, not just the R&D department that was making the treadmill, not just the engineers designing, the frame structure, but it could be, going to marketing of how the content is portrayed, or, the training directors who were building the workout programs, giving them feedback about different workouts that were liked or disliked for certain reasons. So it extended to different things. But if you don't mind, I was curious about the comfort um, item that you mentioned with the shoes. Do you ever have clients that are doing a similar analysis for keywords among their competitors' listings?
Yes, one of our largest customers, they 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 have us measure 8 of their major competitors, and they actually know more about those competitors in many instances than the competitors know about themselves. and and they have 2 or 3 competitors that they measure against all the time with regard to what are their major products, what is their star average, what's driving their
Mhm.
star average, and what are the consumers talking about. And also they're getting sophisticated to the point of, and you had just mentioned this, where are the storylines? In a past life, I had a advertising agency called Kirwin Communications, and one of the great companies that we worked for was Superfeet Footbeds. And there were a lot of storylines of people who were having back problems and ankle problems. And once they got into a Superfeet footbed, they started to walk. And previously, they had only been able to walk maybe 100 yards. But now they were able to walk half a mile, then 3 miles, then 5 miles, and they started to lose weight. And so, smartly, what Superfeet did is they took their marketing program and they blew that storyline up, that footbeds are directly linked to your health because they keep your body aligned. In your book, do you address the power of storylines?
Yeah, in chapter 6, it's specifically dedicated to marketing with UGC and reviews and helping your market. The marketer is the hero of the story by arranging a storytelling of what's happening to the customer, right? The marketer doesn't want to talk about themselves and about the company, but if they can illustrate how consumers like me had a good experience with this product, like if in this case with the shoes, oh, if someone like me, like this person, can have this type of an outcome with this product, I can feel more healthy and lose weight or whatever the expected experience is. Tell that story. Now, when it's paired with reviews, with ratings, with a measured level of satisfaction, it becomes more significant. Like I was once asked by someone, well, do you track or do you care about social media mentions in the same way that you care about review data? And the answer is actually no. Now, social media and what people are saying online, it does influence people, but it's not aggregated to a single number. That star rating that then shapes behaviors. Consumers are trained, we as consumers are trained to trust that number. And so, yeah, we need to tell a story. We need to paint that picture of how other consumers experience the product. But if we can tie it with ratings and reviews, then it's more influential.
And you and I have talked about this in the past, is that there are three things that consumers look at when they look at product reviews. They look at, number one, they look at star ratings. Number two, they look at volume. And number three, they look at recency. Now, that may not be in that order, but those are the three things. Do you address that in the book?
Definitely. In chapter 1, I talk about some very specific natural occurring biases. Like there is bias in the reviews that you look at, because you're not going to go read 1,000 reviews on a product. You're going to see some highlights at the top, the most voted helpful votes. You're most likely to see the reviews that have video and photo content and those ones that are recent. So the text of those reviews is abnormally portrayed, right? Like you're exposed to that more. Now, everything else is just mostly attributing to the star rating. And so, yeah, it's definitely not a full representative sample, and consumers aren't going to do this deep statistical study every time they go buy a pair of socks or a new book or a vacuum or whatever it is. And so, yeah, there are some biases that you need to be aware of.
How many reviews does the normal consumer read before they make a decision? And what is the star rating that they say, okay, that makes it, that authenticates it for me? And how many reviews do they read?
On average, from the research I've seen or done, it's 6. Consumers typically don't read more than 6, or they'll read up to 6. And then as far as what reviews convert at a certain rate, I talk about a principle that I've theorized called review elasticity. Just like in economics, there's price elasticity. Demand changes as price goes up for certain types of goods that have viable substitutes. The same is true with reviews. If a star rating goes up, demand goes up. But the difference with star ratings is it actually peaks at 4.5 stars. Like that. That's the reason why I have 4.5 stars on the cover of the book. It's very symbolic of where ratings are optimized. When you get too close to 5 stars, sales actually start to drop because it's less trustworthy. People think that maybe it's faked or manipulated. Now, there's a half-life relationship at each half star. So 4.5 stars typically sells double 4 stars. And a 4-star listing typically sells double 3.5. And so it's really critical to try to get to that 4.5-star rating, but you never want to try to manipulate ratings in a way that's not authentic just to get to that. Some products, they're not capable of earning that, and those are the ones that end up getting discontinued.
Do consumers sniff that out? In other words, you can go to many brand sites, and then you go and you don't see anything less than a 3.8 star average. Do the consumers understand what's going on, that these are curated, this is curated data and not not real?
Definitely. I think there's a large segment of consumers that are more sophisticated and they pay attention to stuff like that. And they'll flag some of those things and they'll talk about it on Reddit. They'll talk about it on social media and they'll share it with their peers. And then other people find out about it too. I was just actually investigating a situation where a company had incentivized legally, they've legally done this, incentivized over 900 reviews of a product that had really bad ratings. Now, they were completely legally compliant because every review had a disclaimer stating that the product was received as part of a promotion. But they did so many of these that it was a disproportionate representation in the listing. And so there started to be new reviews on the listing saying, don't believe the reviews, they're all incentivized. And so, yeah, it makes sense sometimes to have some promotional reviews when they're properly tagged and they're FTC compliant. But if you take anything to extremes, it doesn't feel good to be the receiver, to be the consumer hearing that message on the other side, and you'll get called out for it. So you need to not be too extreme with stuff like that.
Isn't Amazon really working hard to crack down on all of that?
Yes, Amazon, it's completely not allowed to incentivize reviews in any form. This case study that I was working on was on a different platform where it was still allowed as long as it was FTC compliant.
Wow. So to wrap this up, what do you think is the biggest challenge moving ahead for brands as they work with consumers and work with reviews? What is the biggest challenge? Is it engagement? Is it measuring the whole thing? What do you believe is the biggest challenge ahead for the brands as we move into more and more e-commerce and a more sophisticated consumer?
Oh, that's a really good question, Paul. Honestly, I don't know if you'd expect this answer or not, but I think it's in the mindset of the companies. Instead of being in this mindset of let's protect the bank account, let's protect the bottom line, we need to be thinking about protecting our reputation and working towards building and engineering experiences that people love. Now, that means caring about the bottom line, but going about it in the right order of operations. Understanding what consumers value. That means measuring what they're saying. That means looking at your reviews and finding your positive and negative experience drivers within the rating. And then reverse engineering your experiences and your products from that. And I think that having that mindset of protecting the reputation first, like replace the bottom line, because your reputation precedes the bottom line. Stars precede dollars. And if you prioritize it in that order, then the dollars are going to come as a byproduct.
It's a great answer. Star ratings, volume, recency, but particularly star ratings precede revenue.
Yep.
Matt R. Vance, again, right behind him is The Review Cycle. It's a really good book, and I suggest that you go find that book. And where would we find that book? I already have a copy, obviously.
It's on Amazon, Target.com, Barnes & Noble. They're Goodreads. You can find it on all of those places.
That sounds great. Matt, thanks for your time, and thanks for being a guest on Out and Back.
Hey, thanks, Paul. We'll see you.